Hello and welcome to the Coaches Show on 90.1 KBPK. We're at the end of the semester here for the Coaches Show at Fullerton College, and I've got Holden Remy joined by Danny Tinoco on my right and left. And guys, it's time to kind of recap everything that we've gone through and also interviewed with throughout the entirety of the semester. We had beach volleyball, and again, correct me if I miss anything, but we had beach volleyball, men's basketball, men and women's swimming and dive, men and women's track and field. We had lacrosse, softball, in addition to men's basketball as well. Am I missing anything there?
Men's volleyball as well.
Men's
you
volleyball,
mentioned basketball
thank you.
twice, but
Thank
I know
you.
you meant
Okay.
volleyball. It's okay.
You know, I lose track sometimes, but
a lot of things to
a lot of
cover.
sports, a lot of teams.
it is. But when you mention all those teams, let's actually get into it and how each one of these teams did. We'll start with men's basketball because that was towards the front side of the season and the semester as well. We go to men's basketball where Perry Webster's program, we're used to that legacy which he has built over the last 6 to 7 years of success and near championship wins, in addition to a state title as well. However, last time they were in the postseason, they were one and done. Not what you expected from his program. This year, it was a little different.
Yeah, definitely. If you look at Coach Perry Webster, he has a history of building this kind of winning culture, and with the winning culture also comes with winning, as you see, Fullerton winning state championship back in 2018, I believe.
You would be correct.
2018, and obviously Perry Webster had a lot to deal with. If we look at the injuries, one thing about basketball is consistency. If you don't have a consistent lineup and you're having to plug in players who are injured, it's just going to make it difficult. And I think that may have been a big reason as to why they had a one and done this past season. But I think Perry Webster, like I said, history and culture of winning. It's unlikely that he gets the same result in the next season.
And I mean, I'll turn it over to you, Danny. When you look at a team like Holden mentioned, lots of different lineups, lots of different injuries that they had to deal with, but they were able to get some success going. I mean, you are an athlete. When you see different lineups having to be plugged in each and every day, does it kind of take a mental toll on you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As being a starter or someone on the bench, if you get plugged and played, you're never going to be able to have that killer mindset like, oh, I'm going to start today, I'm going to kill it today. It's always going to be inconsistent. You're never going to be able to find that specific mindset that most athletes try to get into when they play. So I do feel like, as far as like the mental aspect, it has a humongous toll.
So men's basketball for Fullerton College, that toll ends up being paid in the second round this time. They advance one more round, but Coach Perry Webster, again, one of the best coaches in all of California, if not the entire nation, with the way that he was able to handle this program and get them into the postseason and beyond as well with all that they went through this season. So that switches us over to beach volleyball here at Fullerton College. And when you take a look at beach volleyball, guys, beach volleyball, again, they started the program about 5 to 6 years ago. They're still going through those growing pains, and now you've got a brand new coaching staff that they have to not only work their way through, but introduce themselves to.
Yeah, definitely. New coaching staff. Obviously, you want to create and build a good connection with your coaching staff as an athlete, as well as a coach. You want to create good connections with your players, and being a new coach, it could be hard to do that sometimes, especially beach volleyball being a sport where only 2 people are playing for the one team at one time. It kind of breaks it up into different groups, but I think they did a good job of kind of reconvening and kind of building a family this semester.
You know what? I'll stay on this side, Holden, and we'll get to you, Danny, in just a second with swim coming up in just a moment. But staying with the volleyball theme, beach volleyball getting themselves into Orange Empire Conference Championships, getting that opportunity, having multiple first and second team players, but we'll also keep it with the volleyball theme. Men's volleyball, who we also interviewed here on the Coaches Show, had themselves a decent season. We won't say a great season, but a decent one.
Yeah, definitely a decent season. They started off pretty solid in their out-of-conference play, but, if we look at the OEC conference, it's a doghouse, and they did go 1-6 in conference, but, playing against tough competition in itself, whether you win or lose, can be a benefit, and if we look at the men's volleyball team, we had Hunter and Leo, who basically accounted for about 52% of the team's points the entire season. So just wanted to point out those 2 standout players, as well as, the volleyball, it's maybe not as much of a popular sport, especially in Southern California on the men's side, but watching these volleyball games, the team really had a good attitude and they came together and they got after it in every single match that they played.
So we're going to continue our tour now, going from, the main gym here at Fullerton, going to the courts, the beach volleyball courts, the sand pits as well. Then we go over to the Fullerton College Aquatic Center, and we go to swimming and diving. Danny, when you take a look at swimming and diving, this was a team that surprised a lot of people because not a lot of people think of Fullerton College and go, swimming and diving program, that's the legacy. Instead, it's more of an up-and-coming program under Coach Gabriel Martinez, and plain and simple, they shocked a lot of people this year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. During the state finals, we were able to see two of our own athletes, Jonathan Villa and Anushka Kaevsky. They were able to compete at the highest level, with Jonathan Villa placing 7th in the 200 meter butterfly, and with Anushka, she was able to place 7th, which is only like their lowest position in the 200 breaststroke, and everything else in the 200 melody, she was able to place in the 4th position, and with the 400, she was able to place 2nd. So with those, it's just a really nice thing to see our own athletes compete at the highest level, especially in championships.
You mentioned Anushka. We got an opportunity, and John as well, to interview both of them on the coaches show. When you take a look at John Villa, the biggest thing that he mentioned is that he didn't really want to overhype anything going into the state championships because he felt that, this could be the final time that he's in big-time competition. So he wanted to go into the state championships and enjoy the experience, knowing that he's going against some of the best swimmers in the entire state of California. That's exactly what he did. When you take a look at Anushka Jaevsky, one of the biggest things she mentioned, and it was interesting on the coaches show because normally when you talk to an athlete, you say, hey, what do you do for preparation? They tell you, oh, you know what? I listen to music, I go through my normal stretch routines, I kind of think about and envision what's going to happen. You know what her answer was? I try not to think about it. Plain and simple, as long as I don't think about it, I'll be just fine. It surprised us, to say the least, but it turns into great success for her because she's one of the best swimmers in the Orange Empire Conference, one of the best swimmers in the state of California as well, and she had great success going into the state championships as well. So, men and women's swimming and diving shocking people, shocking the state of California with the success that they had so far this season. So, switch it over to Holden. Holden, when you take a look at that softball team, how was their season?
Well, obviously if we look back at the last season that softball played, winning the OEC conference, and we look back to this season, not as good as, we maybe have expected or we were hoping for, but definitely a solid season. We had Casey Dufresne, who made first team All OEC, as well as Dee Ramirez and Jocelyn Harigi making second team All OEC. And, Dee Ramirez, Casey Dufresne, and Jocelyn Harigi all kind of were the heart and soul of the Fullerton College softball team. And if we look, another part of the heart and soul is the pitching. And I think part of the reason why Fullerton may have started to tail off slightly is the pitching. If we look at the ERA from out-of-conference games to in-conference games, the ERA jumps about 0.7 points to 4.3 ERA in conference. And as we look towards the end of the season, you really need your pitchers in the circle to shore up and get those wins because if we look at what happened in the regional championships, Fullerton lost to Long Beach State 1-0 in both games that they played. And while the pitching seems to be showing up, only allowing one run, the batting may seem to have let Fullerton down towards the latter half of the season.
When you mentioned that, one of the biggest things for Javier Giron, who was also here on the coaches show, what we mentioned last week is that Fullerton College had to keep their fielding percentage high if they were going to be good in the postseason. You talked about it 2 weeks ago. If you don't have a high fielding percentage, it's going to cost you. Now for Fullerton in the postseason, they did a good job of keeping their fielding percentage high, but it's that timely hitting, Danny, that sometimes can really bite you if it doesn't end up clicking when you need it.
Absolutely. I mean, bringing it back to what Holden said about the Long Beach losses 1-0, the offense just wasn't there. The timely hitting, it's always something that's going to be really important to really juice up that offense. Just being able to just go out there with that dog mentality and just overall the offense, It did stutter at some points. At some points, it really came through. One example would be the 5-6 win versus LA Mission. Me and Holden had the opportunity to call that game where we saw Lindy Aguilar hit that little single to the right side and be able to hit a walk-off. So those are the timely hitting that we would be referencing too. And sadly, it just didn't come through the regionals. However, we have faith in our team, and we believe they'll be able to go far next year.
That's the thing. When you mention next year, they've got a good lineup of freshmen who had a really nice season this year, learned from players like Dee Ramirez, learned from Casey Dufresne, and they will be part of that leadership going into next season. So for softball, they get into the postseason, but unfortunately drop their series in a best 2 out of 3 to Long Beach City College. So they dropped 2 straight, and that finishes off the softball season. Now, here at Scherbeck Field, where we're standing, we had not one sport that we talked to, but multiple. Track and field is where we will start. Men and women's track and field, and I'll start with Danny this time. Danny, when you look at men and women's track and field, we got the opportunity to talk to these athletes, and it's interesting when you talk to them because not a lot of people look to track and field and think, okay, you know what, that's a marquee sport in Southern California, but it's growing, and you can tell just by the enthusiasm that they showed when we interviewed them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had the honor of interviewing Annalise Powell. As of the finals, she was able to finish top 10 in the 400 meters hurdles. And as I was interviewing her, she seemed extremely enthusiastic on what she wanted to do. She knew exactly what she needed to do. She had her own little regimen that she went through every day. And it just really showed the kind of dog mentality that all our athletes have here at Fullerton College.
So I go over to Holden. Holden, when you take a look at some of the other events that take place here for track and field, Fullerton had themselves a nice season.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm going to focus on the hurdles, more particularly the 400-meter hurdles. We also, like Danny said, Annalise Powell, who, along with Karen, what was her last name? So just hold on. Also, was
Leon Jet. Just say her first name and I'll put it in post-production.
Okay. Yeah, so if we take a look at hurdles, specifically 400-meter hurdles, we had 2 athletes place third and fourth place in the 400-meter hurdles, Annalise Powell. And if we look on the men's side, we had Leon Jet, who placed 4th place in the SoCal Regional Championships and 2nd place in the Orange Empire Conference Regionals. Basically, he had a great season, one of the better runners, and man, if you watch him, this guy runs like a gazelle.
It's funny, when you mention him, he came over from a state on the East Coast in Delaware, which he mentioned, lots of rainy days, lots of days that you can't go out and practice as well as you would have liked, and you have to deal with it when you're training for different things and different events like the hurdles. Especially, it's hard to be able to go from, rain and sometimes snow and train at the highest level and get that rhythm going. But switching over to Southern California really helped him because he comes here to Southern California. The training regimen can be more consistent, more opportunity to train in the weather that he would compete in as well. So when you look at men and women's track and field, lots of good things going on. Leon Jet, Annalise Powell. One of the people that I want to highlight is Maui Miranda, who joined us on the Coaches Show multiple times. For Maui, one of the biggest things for her is that she joins Fullerton College's track and field program and learns different disciplines during the season. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but myself, when I was an athlete a long time ago in high school, there's no way that I could pick up a discipline out of nowhere, get taught it, nearly master it, and then turn into an all-conference type of athletic performer. That's exactly what Maui was able to do this season for Fullerton College. She learned 2 different disciplines during the season and was still able to place really well at the Orange Empire Conference Championship. So we want to thank her and congratulate her on a nice season for Fullerton College. Again, thank her for joining us on the Coaches Show. So when we take a look at football directly behind us, which is kind of walking around, meandering for spring practice, we'll get some more on football later on in the year. So not this semester, but more towards August. That's when we're going to have a lot more football programming, a lot more interviews with the football team as well. So football, we'll get to that later. But one thing that I want to go to you guys, when you look at this entire season, this semester, what are some of the favorite interviews that you guys ended up having? Because one thing that I always do in these recaps is kind of think back on what I did throughout the entirety of the semester. Who did I talk to? Who was a cool interview? What were some of my favorite moments? So I'll go to each one of you, whoever wants to pick up here. What was the favorite interview that you had?
Well, I'll start off. I'm a former football player, and a couple weeks ago we got to talk to the offense and some of the defensive coaches. So I have to say my favorite interview was when I got to talk to Coach Gardner. Coach Gardner is just a very animated person. He gave some great answers, and it was nice to go from a year ago being a player and talking to him like a player, and then now flash forward to a couple weeks ago, talking to him and interviewing him, picking his brain as a reporter.
For me personally, a couple weeks out, I was here interviewing athletes here at the track, and I think my favorite one would have to be my interview with Annalise Powell. At first, it started a little rocky. She did seem a little nervous, but as the interview went on, she got more comfortable, and then eventually the interview became a conversation. She gave a lot of in-depth answers on her sort of regimen that she does, and overall, I feel like that was definitely also a good learning experience for myself as well.
I mean, when you mention learning experiences, I'm a hockey guy. I'm from a hockey background. I also translate that into a lot of lacrosse. Lacrosse and hockey were easily 1 and 2 for me in terms of favorite sports when I was growing up. So to be able to talk to the lacrosse team here on campus was really cool for me, and also talk to those athletes to get their perspectives on things. When we talked to lacrosse, one of the biggest things that I noted from the coaching staff and the players is just how committed they are to learning a brand new sport. Now, of course, the coaching staff has a lot of experience with lacrosse. You've got former college players who are helping instruct these students. But some of these student athletes are learning lacrosse on the fly, because most of them are soccer players who need a little bit more of an off-season regimen, and they get that opportunity by going out and playing lacrosse. And it was a case of some of the women's soccer coaching staff meeting, looking at the players and saying, hey, if you want to keep in shape, in soccer shape, you have the opportunity to play lacrosse. This is it can kind of translate pretty well in terms of fitness and positioning as well. And those student athletes went, committed to it, and they turned into a really good program. Like you were mentioning, getting 3 wins against teams where you have to go against Division I opponents and also Division I, 2, 3 NAIA schools as a community college is so impressive. And to know that you're learning this sport as you start to play it is not only bewildering, but it's insanely impressive as well. So when you take a look at one of my favorite interviews from this entire semester, it was going out talking to the lacrosse program here at Fullerton College. Now, when you take a look at what you two have done here on the program, and also Javier Giron, one of the biggest things that he has done so far this semester, you guys got the opportunity to call a softball game. Now, softball was probably one of the more interviewed programs that we had on the Coaches Show this semester. When you take a look at these softball players from the time that we started, and you guys first got those first few interviews under your belt, to where the postseason ends up finishing for them, is there anything that impressed you in terms of talking to these softball athletes and getting to know them on a personal level through interviews?
For me personally, I come from a baseball background. Baseball and softball, they are similar and yet incredibly different. And it was just an amazing thing to see how these girls go out there every day with their head held up high, and them going through everything that I had to go through, except now they're doing it at a way higher level than I did. Overall, I just really like to see the improvement these girls had every time as far as their mentality goes. When I first interviewed them, they seemed like very new to the whole situation when it came to interviews, but also that they had like that spark. And as the season went along, I did see that spark just become a huge fire, and it was really nice to see.
Yeah, I also want to add, how closely knit together this softball team was. When we were calling that game, there was a big delay as we were waiting for the umpires, and we saw a dance battle between Fullerton and Palomar on home plate. And just the fact that, we see these girls, they're smiling, they're laughing, they're dancing, and, talking to some of the girls later, they really emphasize how close they are together. And I think that's a big reason as to why they're able to perform well.
When you take a look at those dance battles, talking to the coaches, the athletes, the players, one of the big things about the coaches show, the entire experience that it involves, for myself, having done this for about 8 seasons now, 8 years altogether, is kind of the conversations you have off camera with the coaches, the players, and also the different people from around the programs that we talk to. Is there one character that you guys got to talk to, whether on camera, off character, that kind of stood out as, you know what, that was a really enjoyable part of being part of the coaches show this year and learning about these different programs?
Yeah, for me, that character would be the pitcher of Fullerton College, Emily Flores. When I was interviewing her, she was very serious when it came to interviews. She knew what she was talking about. She knew what she had to do. Very, very locked in. And honestly, that's like just a beautiful thing to see as far as an athlete's perspective goes.
Yeah, well, other than the eternal student who's standing behind the camera, Mark, I would also say my softball interview with Bella Nahara was really good. Just the conversation we had before the interview, as well as conversations after. We now follow each other on Instagram, so if in the event later down the line we need to talk about something, we have questions, just building that kind of relationship with different athletes. Being a former athlete myself, during the pandemic specifically, you don't have those opportunities to kind of talk to these other athletes, and sometimes you can't even talk to your own teammates. So just the fact that, getting able to talk to these other athletes and, seeing them around campus, just as simple as, oh, hey, what's up, how are you doing? I think that made a big impact on me this semester.
I think the biggest thing for myself, guys, is actually 2 different areas. So we go to the start of the semester with beach volleyball, meeting the brand new coaching staff of beach volleyball and indoor women's volleyball as well was really informative for me, because one thing about new coaching staffs is it's really tough when you go to get interviews to kind of establish that connection and relationship with a coach to start things off, because you're brand new. It's like meeting someone you've never met before and then telling them, hey, by the way, we're going to be out here just a few times to talk to you and also your student athletes as well. And it was really not only informative, but impressive to see that coaching staff, because each one of the coaches on that staff looked at me and said, hey, this is the passion that I have for this program. Here's what I love about this sport, and here's why I love dealing with student athletes. And here is also how we can mentor these student athletes to go from just athletes who are looking to play a sport into well-rounded members of society. You saw that passion, you saw the care that went into them talking to us, and it really left an impression on me from a new coaching staff, and especially when talking to the head coach about what she would like to have as her legacy at Fullerton College by the end of her time at Fullerton way down the road. I asked her, what would you like your legacy to be? And she said, number 1, a person who is able to mentor student athletes. A person that these student athletes can go to and say, yeah, I want to improve on my sport, but I also want to be able to learn how to be more well-rounded, how to be more consistent as a person as a whole, how to hit the books a little bit better, how to manage my time better. That was the type of legacy she wanted to bring to this program. That was impressive to me. Then I go towards the back half of the semester. This happened just last week. Talking to Gabriel Martinez and Coach Martinez, I've been able to talk to him for 8 years now as he directs the program of water polo here at Fullerton College through multiple national championships. And each and every time we go out there for water polo, he's always been very welcoming and very blunt with where he feels that his athletes are. If they're not having a great session of practices, he'll say it. He'll say, you know what? That session of practice was not great. I want a do-over. I want them to be able to come out of here and say, yeah, practice was grueling, but I'm prepared for what we're going to come through later on in state, later on in the OEC. Or if his team is playing really well, he'll look at us and say, hey, you know what? I got a good feeling about this team. This is a special squad. Now, that's on the water polo side. When we move over to the swimming and diving portion, it was really interesting to be able to not only talk to him, but also a new head coach who we're going to have here on campus. And you can go back and watch that coaches show that we had last week. But getting to talk to them and say, hey, this is a different aspect than water polo. What has gone right? What has gone wrong for this program? And Coach Martinez looking at us and saying, very simple, we shocked people. We shocked ourselves. We weren't expecting to be in the spot that we were in, but we are. We're sending athletes to state championships and getting results as well. That, in addition to the way that his eyes light up, the way that his mannerisms turn into the passion that he has, talking to Coach Martinez, normally he's a very reserved person. He'll talk with his hands just a little bit. But then you talk about his student athletes. You talk about Anushka Jaevsky. You talk about Charlie Jackson. You talk about John Villa. And he starts really telling you what this person means to this program. A person like Charlie Jackson, who was part of the water polo program and turned into a leader. We got to talk to her in the fall. Anushka Jaevsky, who he knew she was good, but they were able to take her to a state championship type of level. John Villa, who we mentioned earlier, had a great season for swimming and dive, and him telling us exactly what goes into the training for each and every individual. Those are the two different types of coaching staffs that really leave an impression on me when we're doing the coaches show, because it gives you an opportunity not just to look at what they're doing athletics-wise, but also why it makes Fullerton College a special program. So, as we're wrapping things up, guys, I want to ask you, in terms of seasons, what was the most fun season to keep up with? I'll start with you.
Me personally, I mean, it just has to be softball. I mean, we covered them for so long throughout the season, seeing the girls be able to go out there and compete, seeing a walk-off win, which is one of the most exciting things I've seen in a long time. Overall, the future is looking very bright for them, and I'm very eager to follow their season.
You know, I want to go back to real quick what we talked about before, new coaches. We also talked to track and field, the hurdler and sprinters coach, Coach Frisco, who I had the opportunity to work with for about 2 weeks in the summer and kind of train for track. So I want to give a shout out to him as well for doing a great job with the sprinters and hurdlers, as well as we talked to a new coach who's not as new, considering he was also a football player here, Coach Dustin Sober, who is a linebackers coach as well as special teams coordinator. So I just wanted to bring up those two coaches who we talked to, who have an extreme passion for getting the most out of their athletes. But as far as the best sport in terms of we are following, you know, I'm a big basketball guy. I have some friends who played on the basketball team as well as a friend who currently plays on the basketball team. And as we weren't able to necessarily keep track of the entire season as it started, you know, it was already ongoing once the semester started. But I'd have to say basketball was the most fun to keep up with for me.
So when you mention those coaches that you were able to talk to and also the athletes, we want to send a big thank you to everyone who has joined us on the Coaches Show this entire semester. Again, going back, Coach Perry Webster and his basketball program, the brand new coaching staff of women's beach volleyball and indoor volleyball as well for joining us on the Coaches Show. You go to track and field, Coach Shield, Coach Bevick as well, big thank you. You know, there were a couple times that we ended up showing up to track and field for interviews. It was hot. You know, all three of us looked at each other and said, hey, you know what? It's hot. We got out to the track and we were like, well, let's get these interviews done. Let's move things along. The coaching staff looked at us and said, no. We're staying out here as long as you guys need programming. As long as you guys need to record, we will come out and do these interviews. And they were extremely gracious to host us out here. In addition to the football coaches, we hear enough from them in the fall. We'll thank them later. But softball as well, we want to thank Coach Crystal Aguirre, in addition to swimming and diving with Coach Gabriel Martinez as well. So that's going to do it for us on the Coaches Show on 90.1 KBPK. For Javier Giron, Holden Remy, Danny Tinoco, I am Ryan Osborne. We are going to thank you for joining us here on the Coaches Show on 90.1 KBPK.